All right, we back. You already know what it is. We back with another dope episode of No Pump Fakes. We here. And we got a special guest on today's recording. We got Scoop Jackson on the show. What's going on, man?
Nothing, man. What's going on with you? Thanks for having me.
No doubt, no
Allow me
doubt.
to bend down on you. I like it. I like it.
No
The
doubt,
Slam
no doubt.
legend, the OG.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So usually I feel like, people may save a question like this, for the middle or the end of a conversation. But, here on No Pump Fakes, we like to go the opposite direction, of course. So first things first, I gotta ask this. If you could, right? If you had to give us, I'll say your top two either slam moments or stories with regards to slam, what would they be? Starting from the top.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, off rip. I know that's like I said. Usually the softballs.
Let's get three.
You starting with some heat.
Right. I said two because it was the first question. But if you want to make it three, I mean, by all means.
No, I'm just trying to. Yeah, man. Like you said, OG. I'm trying to think of one. One thing. Y'all realize when you get to OG status, the first thing that goes is your recall.
Okay. Yeah.
But off the top, man, I think one was the draft class, the draft class shoot. The famous one, the original spread, the 96 draft class, whatever. What class was that?
96.
Yeah, 96 draft class shoot. But the shoot itself was special. That was a special moment. But the one I think that tops it is that's where we started XXL Magazine. We started it at a bar at the hotel that we were not supposed to be at, staying under assumed names. So we were on some guerrilla, early days slam guerrilla, getting the cover shoot, getting stuff done, with the help of people inside the NBA. But the night before that shot, before we shot that cover, Tony Trevino, Don Morris, myself, we were sitting at the bar at the hotel trying to actually lay out how we were going to make that shoot happen. Because they told us we only had a certain amount of time to make this happen. So that we needed to be exact. We need to tell which players we wanted. We need to have the players lined up the way we wanted. None of that messing around. Like, y'all got like 5 minutes to make this happen. So we were sitting at the bar on a paper napkin, literally. And Don was drawing out and Tony was sketching out how they wanted it to fold out. So we knew exactly what we were doing. But in the process of doing that, Don wasn't, a real sports basketball fan. That wasn't his thing. He was a culture, music, just skate. Or, Don was sports wasn't his thing. And he was going crazy, he needed to do something else. And we're like, look, man, let's, and men's magazines were kind of hot back then. They had Maxim had just started and everything from Maxim, the arena in London was going on. And JFK Jr. started George magazine. So all these men-themed magazines were going on. And we're like, all right, we need to, let's do something culturally relevant to men. And Don was like, but it got to be hip-hop based. And I'm like, yeah, it's got to be hip-hop based, So it's not like we were trying to go at Vibe or go at The Source or, go at Blaze, none of that. We were just trying to find a men's magazine. And we conceptualized XXL at that bar in the middle of this shoot for the 96 draft class. And it's so funny to me, and that's why it stands out, because what XXL has become over this period of time. And I remember sitting at that bar, we wrestling over names, like what we gonna call names. And this is probably why it sticks out in my head, because I wanted to call it Leroy. Because there's no white people named Leroy. I'm like, Leroy is the beautifulest black name. Like, what you're dealing with when you got a Leroy, right? So, as I said, they got white boys got George. We're gonna have Leroy. We're gonna do it that way. That was my thing, right? Tony wanted to call it Cojones, which is like dope. I was like, that's the perfect name. That's a great name because, it works. I said, but Tony, black folks will read that and say Co-Jones. It ain't gonna work, man. It's not gonna work. And we're like, the greatest name to name a magazine, a men's magazine, was taken, and that was Players. So we couldn't use that, right? So I remember sitting there, we were wrestling names, and we didn't come up with XXL till like a couple of weeks later. I remember Don and Tony actually pitched the concept to the president of the company at the time, was Stanley Harris. And he basically said, you all have made me so much money with Slam. Whatever idea y'all come up with, I'm good. I'll bankroll it. So there was a lot of trust there. And Don literally kept messing around. I was messing. We were all kind of just brainstorming over the weeks with names and stuff like that. And, my thing is looking at the Black magazine culture at the time. I just didn't want the magazine to start with the letter E. There's Essence and Ebony. And I'm like, we got to get beyond that. So I wanted it to speak to a different audience. And I forgot how he came up with it. I think he was at shopping and saw a hang tag or something like that. And Don saw the letters XXL, standing for extra large. I think it was an item. And he, him being a graphic design genius, he blocked out those letters, just everything else around it, and looked at that and just thought of how it would look on, a cover of a magazine. And he said every other, magazine you see out there, the name, is stretched across the top of the mag. It's there's no space. It's just the name, and that's really the sale. And all of a sudden, they even vibe with this big 4 letters, but still stretched out. He said, just corner this. You know what I'm saying? Just look at it as a corner. You got so much space to deal with from an art perspective and all this. He just looked at it as that's what's going to make this magazine stand out. That's what's going to make this magazine unique. And, looking at the name, looking at putting it in a red block, that was kind of what Ebony did sometimes. He said, just look at the red. He just designed it in a way that it was more of the design aspect of the name XXL or XXL, as opposed to just what it stood for, extra, extra large. And his whole concept, like, we got to deal with this magazine. It's like dealing with hip hop on a higher level, not the extra largeness, but this is hip hop on a different level. And we're like, that's so that's what that's the one I remember the most because of what came out of it. You know what I'm saying? That was the one I think that was the most special, and we were able to really dive into things. So I think that's the number one. Number two, wow. I think probably Tony's risk. I got it. It's easy. Tony's number two would be Tony's risk of putting Rayford Austin on the cover. Because at the time, this is like before the Skip tape came out. You know what I'm saying? This is like 5 years before that. But we knew who he was by watching him, as a teenager. So we were familiar with Skip for real. So when he finally signed on to Fresno State, Tony had the concept of like, yo, boom. And I remember Tony and Dennis going back and forth about this, but Tony, like, just his genius was not who Rayford Austin was, because he sold that as speaking to what our magazine was about. We're about the culture of basketball, and we know who this kid is. And this isn't, he speaks to everything that we built this magazine about. But his just genius, and like, it isn't the cover, it isn't him, it isn't the shot. It's not even the tagline. It's under the tagline. It's the name you never heard of, because the best point guard in the world, he's like, that's what's going to sell the magazine. You put a cat on there that nobody outside of New York knows about and give him the title, the best point guard in the world. That's going to grab people. He said, but it's right under there that nobody's heard of. That's what's going to get it. It's going to grab him right there with the headline. They're going to be like, what? And then they'd be like, wait, you never heard of? That's what's going to make him pick up the magazine. And I'm sitting there watching like, damn, kind of guys that are like built and meant to do things, being around Tony all the time, like he's a genius. So I get what he's doing. But to see him come up with that concept and execute that concept and like, bam, that's it. That's the second one. And the third one was the entire throwback issue, the Allen Iverson one. Because the centerpiece to that entire issue was built around the Julius Erving story, the Dr. J story we were telling. And we have been chasing Dr. J for years. Like that was our holy grail. That was it. And he finally decided to sit down with us. And, this was the one that Dennis was like, because they assigned me to the story, and Dennis like, Scoop, don't fuck this up. Tony's like, Scoop, don't fuck this up. So So I'm like, all right, because this, in our minds, this was our biggest get. We had interviewed Michael Jordan, but he wasn't the same with us. Doc was it for us, man. And, to get Doc to sit down and speak to us and explain why it took so long to get there and all this, that, and the other. And, to get that interview. And then for Tony, again, with his genius. And Dennis, too, I give Dennis credit for this, too, because, the thing was to put Dr. J on the cover of the issue and have that be the throwback issue. Dr. J, it's like, but we didn't know if we were going to use an old Dr. J. I think Tony was leaning towards and Don was leaning towards an old Dr. J photo. I'm not sure. But we got Doc, and that was going to be a centerpiece. But I think Dennis, I may be wrong, but I think Dennis was the one that's like, no, we need something new on here. We need something, Dr. J may not pop from a newsstand sale because of, who he is, even though this is like the throwback issue or whatever. And for them to come up with the idea like, hey, Allen Iverson is perfect. Because of what he represents, who he represents, his relationship with us. Every time he's on the cover, it pops, it sells. And I think at the time he'd been on 2 covers, maybe. So getting him and his ties to Philadelphia, because Julius was a 76er as well. So, tying all that together, it just made sense to build, this magazine around that Dr. J thing. And it may have been Russ. I don't know whose idea it was to pitch Allen about leaving his braids out for the afro. But he was so down with us that he's like, hey, like, I don't do this for anybody, but for y'all, I'll do this. As long as I can rock my ice, like, dude, do your thing. You know what I'm saying? And, the brilliance of that cover, to build around that, for Tony to label it like the throwback issue, to get Allen in a throwback, Mitchell and Ness jersey, which is not, people didn't know Mitchell and Ness existed back then. It was just a small retro company in Philadelphia. That magazine blew Mitchell and Ness up, the whole concept. And to be honest with you, that really wasn't, I think they made an Allen Iverson jersey, but it's actually a Hal Greer jersey from back in the day. That they mocked for Iverson and he used. And then to throw the red, white, and blue basketball, that is an homage to Dr. J. Because, if you think about it, Philadelphia they never had a team in the ABA. So to have that ABA ball with that retro thing, with the retro jersey on Philadelphia, all of that is for Julius Erving. You know what I'm saying? People don't even get, they think it's Allen Iverson. That whole concept was Julius Erving, because that's supposed to be Julius Erving on the cover of the magazine. So for them to flip it and basically turn Allen Iverson into a new school Dr. J with the afro, the ABA ball, the old Philly jersey, and then the little small detail in that is the wife beater under the jersey. If you look at that, that's not a mistake. Like, in shooting that, they're like, no, leave that showing. Because that's like so gangster that nobody would even realize. But everybody in the hood knew, oh, that's some real shit. You know what I'm saying? That's like not caring that somebody's shoelaces are out of place on a photo. It's like, that's that real thing. And that's what made that whole thing so special. So those are my top 3.
That's a heavy 3. I like all 3 of those. Let me ask 2, right? So the ending of that, we talk about Allen Iverson, right? Do you think the game of basketball will ever see another player with the type of impact that AI has had on the culture? Because AI was right, like Twitter, right, pre-TikTok, but even still with the level of fame that he had, and now, right, think about in the world that we're in now with 2022. Do you think we'll ever again see a player like Allen Iverson have that type of impact on the culture?
If you had asked me this 10, maybe 20 years ago, my answer would be no. But I've learned over the course of my time and that period of time I just mentioned that, history doesn't repeat itself. It just gets remixed. So I believe we will. I've learned, like, I never thought that we'd see from a basketball standpoint. I thought George Gervin was the one player that we would never see again. Nobody that small, that skinny, that could score like that. That frame, that had the ability to score. We would never, ever see that again. I thought we'd have a chance to see another Michael Jordan. We'd have a chance to see another Larry Bird. I'm pretty sure we're going to see another Magic Johnson, and those players that were unique, even when Nate Archibald was able to, somebody that small, having that type of impact. And, I'm pretty sure we'll probably see somebody at some point, and it may be Trae Young, that leads the league in scoring and assists. Like as a kid, I'm like, that's never going to happen again. Whoever thought we see somebody averaging a triple-double like Oscar Robertson and then Russell comes on. So I've seen things come along, but the one thing I knew for sure we never see because of how NBA bodies have gotten so much bigger and stronger now. Unlike George Gervin is the anomaly. You know what I'm saying? He's the unicorn. We'll never see that again. And then here comes KD. It's like, damn. So I've learned to never say that because it just takes a matter of time. Sometimes it's 20 years. Sometimes it's 30 years. Sometimes it's a couple of generations before we see something like that again. So to answer your question about Allen Iverson, I think we're going to see it, but it will be remixed. You know what I'm saying? It will be something different. It will be taking into consideration all of the things that are in play right now or will be in play down the line. With nothing really being new or nothing taking anybody by surprise because of social media and people not coming out of anywhere, will have that impact. I think we're seeing a slight version of it, maybe in Ja Morant.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
say. A little bit, but I don't know if Ja's going to be able to transcend the way Allen has. I don't know. It's going to be interesting if he can transcend the sport the way Allen did, because Allen represented so much more than just basketball. And what he did was still fascinate people for over a period of, 12 years maybe? Something like that. And that's kind of where Steph Curry comes into play. It's not what Steph Curry did 8 years ago, or 6 years ago that was fascinating. It's kind of what he's doing now. The fact that he's been able to still do it over this period of time. And that's what fascinates us. And that's what fascinates us. Allen's like, this ain't gonna last. There's nobody, there's no way this small cat playing the way he plays is going to be able to sustain this over the course of a legit career. So let's enjoy this while we can, because it's not gonna last long. But then it's like, damn, 7 years. Damn, 9 years. Damn, 11 years. You know what I'm saying? It's like, when is this going? That's when you start appreciating it. And when we watch Steph get to that point now, it's like, we're still fascinated. It's going to be interesting to see if Ja Morant's going to be able to sustain this level for 10 more years. You know what I'm saying? That's what's going to be interesting. And if his style, if his commitment, if his sense of freedom, and that's to me the thing that stands out about Iverson in answering your question. It's not just what he represented culturally. It's what he represented as us as Black individuals when it comes to sports. He showed us what freedom looks like. And to me, there's only been a few Black athletes been able to do that. Ali was one, to show you this is what freedom looks like for us in the space of sports, where I'm going to be me. Like my principles, my belief, my Blackness, this is me. And this country and this society and this business that I'm in is not strong enough to change my core. It's not strong enough to make me compromise anything. That's what we saw in Iverson. That's what we saw in Muhammad Ali. I don't know if we're going to see that in Ja Morant. We may see it. But to see that transcending athlete in basketball, we may see it, but it's going to take more than just that, because to me, in Allen Iverson, it's going to have to be that individual that embodies what our freedom at that time looks like on the court. And I don't know if, I don't know if Ja's it. I don't know when we're going to see that athlete, but I do believe at some point in time, we're going to see that again. Do you think it's going to be harder with the way the generation plays, like for like social media and stuff, compared to back in the day? I think it's going to be hard. That's a good point. I think there's twofold. I think, yes, it can be harder because, like I said, you can't take anybody by surprise, and it's everything everybody's doing is right up there in front. So it's going to be harder to have that type of generational impact when we already know who you are. You're telling us who you are throughout the course of this. So your journey is already exposed by the time you get to a certain stage. So that's going to make it harder. But it's going to allow you to have more people following what you're doing and your journey, because it's going to be easier because they have the access to you. You're going to be able to group more people together and have a gathering, have a following, and be able to get your voice out there much louder. And you're going to be able to do it on your own accord, as opposed to waiting for the media to sell your story to the rest of the world. You're going to have some control of that by yourself through the advent of whatever social media outlets will be around, that are around now, will be around the next 5 to 10 years. So I think, there's that gift and that curse is going to work with and against what you just asked. What I do think, though, is going to make it more difficult. If we look at the path we're on right now, and I don't see a change coming anytime soon. I think we're at the beginning of the next phase of how we're going to function as a whole country with the divisiveness and people really like embodying how they feel and being emboldened to, express how they feel, especially when it comes to matter of race and power. I think that's going to make it harder because the fight on the other side of what your freedom looks like is going to get tested in ways that probably weren't around when Iverson came up. That test from the other side of the anti-Allen Iverson wasn't as strong as it's about to be. So, when they start, when you see an athlete that is, a black athlete or an athlete of color that is expressing what the sense of minority freedom looks like, the anti-woke side is going to be like, nah, we're not going to lay quiet anymore. You know what I'm saying? This is going to be up front. So, and we're seeing it very stark right now. So that athlete who is going to be that voice or be that embodiment of freedom, that's what's going to be hard for them, I think, in the future. Because I don't think at any point we're going to see the downside of the anti-quote-unquote freedom movement start regressing. Especially when you start seeing the Supreme Court start making like judgments that are affecting lives, on another sense of freedom. When it gets to that level, that shows you that this is not going anywhere anytime soon. So for every next Allen Iverson that we see coming along, there's going to be a stronger push against that. So that's what I think is going to make it harder more than anything else.
Do you think there's been a shift in the way players tend to use their voice, whether it be through social media or overall off the court, things that they might partake in?
Yes, I think so. But I think that's because of the climate we're in. I mean, the climate has changed. And if you look at the way sports moves, with the way society moves, they usually go hand in hand. The interesting thing is that I think sports and sports figures, they really don't often start those movements, but they always seem to be at the forefront. So when there is a shift in mentality in society, you usually see sports figures when it comes to us be at the front of that movement happening. So yes, I see a shift because society has started to shift. And when you saw the, awakening of America a couple of years ago at the hands of the killings of a George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, or Ahmaud Arbery, you see these things and you see society start to shift with that. A lot of times at the forefront, of just that was the WNBA, was the NBA, was the LeBron James, was the Derrick Roses, was the Carmelo Anthony's, were the Megan Rapinos. We could go down the line on all of the athletes that were at the forefront of this vocal movement, of this physical movement to get to, and the Colin Kaepernicks, to make the country aware of what society is actually saying. Like I said, the athletes didn't start it, but they're at the forefront of it. So I think we've seen that change right now because it coincides with what happened in the 60s, and the movement going on. We mentioned Muhammad Ali's, and we look at, all the other athletes that were Jim Browns, and, just everybody else. And we go back to the 40s where you looked at, how, Jackie Robinson and, those guys, the Don Newcombs, started infiltrating white society to find equality for us. And that was what Dr. King used as a model to how he was going to stage what he did. When he went back and talked to them and thanked them for showing him the way to be civil and make change. Where we're looking at Dr. King as the father of the civil rights movement, but he watched baseball players set the example for how he was going to strategize his movements. We look at the Jack Johnsons and the original boxers from back in the day in the 1900s, and what they had to go with and deal with. We look at the Jesse Owens, going up against and representing America going against Hitler. You know what I'm saying? So you look at athletes always at the forefront of it. So you look at what's going on now, but if you really look at it, there's always been a societal connection between athlete and society and movements. That I do think society starts it, but the athletes, for the most part, always get to the forefront and become the strongest and premier voices of those movements.
What's your perspective on how the game of basketball is kind of covered today? Because when you talk about like the way society is moving, I kind of look at like basketball as being the one sport where the media or just people in general constantly are kind of like chastising the players, like having something negative to say about the players and stuff like that.
Of course. And I hate to say it, they're supposed to. Name me another business inside of America where the workforce is 80% of color and has the power to leverage situations the way the NBA does. Just name me one. So they're supposed to, I can't find one. We can look at the entire culture of hip hop. That's not that. We see all this movement and engagement and the power that's, what we're seeing, the power that's shifting with black film and the power of that. They don't have that type of leverage, inside of filmmaking. They don't see that. We don't see that in the arts. We don't see that at all. We don't see that in design. We don't see that in, in television. Where we're seeing a lot of more black presence and black power movers from, Shonda Rhimes to, whoever. We don't see Kenya Burris. We don't see that type of leverage with those type of numbers in those industries. There's not a business, I don't think, in America that has a workforce that is over 80% of color where they have this type of power. So, of course, there's supposed to be, some backlash and pushback on that because this is something that America has never seen before. And America doesn't want to see this. They don't want this. They don't know how to react to this. They're not used to seeing, brothers or sisters having this much, leverage and power to do what they want to do. And even though we're not running the league because, the black ownership is still low, there's, Mark is the closest we're going to get to a black commissioner in sports right now. And, if you look at the executive boards, it is, there's a small percentage of us in there.
Yeah,
but we're there, it's still a small percentage. But it's the labor force that has power. And because there are not too many Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 companies in America where the workforce is that strong and the population of it is, runs the gamut of being, like I said, at the 80% percentile of people of color, they don't see that. So, yeah, I get where the scrutiny is coming from because this is a threat to the power structure of America. You know what I'm saying? They're not. No, y'all not supposed to have that much power. Not like that. So it's supposed to come. My thing with us is recognizing that it's going to come and continue to navigate with that. And not be surprised or taken aback because, they don't like us or, they're going to push back. No, we should expect that because we should know that this itself is the unicorn of America. Seeing something like this, the entire culture of basketball, especially from an NBA standpoint, where it's like, oh, no, this is not supposed to happen. And if it does happen, it's not supposed to be successful. And if it is successful, then it's got to be successful only to them. We can't support this type of success. So, yeah, I totally get it. And I think it's going to be a fight that we're going to be in. And I love the fact that we're not backing down from it. And we're continuing to push forward with it.
Yeah, and one word that you used was leverage, right? And I think with the world and the space that we're in now, a lot of players are realizing the leverage that they do have, right, in terms of contracts, advertisements, all that. But unfortunately, right, there's an audience, a group of people that feel like players should just do what they're told. Even though they bring a wild amount of value for everyone in this industry, they're still looked at as being like, oh no, you should do this, you should do that. Do you think that damage has been done in terms of how players are treated, not just by the media, but in terms of them having their own voice? Do you think there's a deeper discussion that needs to happen instead of it being viewed as, okay, a player wants to leave this team or a player wants to go to that team, instead of maybe we should start thinking of, okay, this player knows his worth, right? Because to your point, that's something that scares a lot of people, just the thought of players actually knowing that they could be doing other things on other teams or whatever the case may be.
Right. No, I think, how can I say this? I think there's always a threat when it comes to the color of our skin and our ability to navigate and function at a high level. And there's always going to be pushback from a societal standpoint, especially a white societal standpoint when it comes to that, because they're not used to seeing it. And I know the one thing, when it comes to business, for the most part in this country, and I'll generalize and spread this across the board. The one thing American business, especially white-owned American business, does not want is for us to get smarter. Smarter about our value, smarter about our abilities, smarter about our, leverage, for lack of a better word, smarter about what our true value is. They don't want us to understand that and be able to insert that into what it is that we do, quote unquote, for them. So when we're looking at basketball, specifically the NBA, for the players to understand the simple fact that, owners can complain all they want about not making money, but I don't think it's happened once. There hasn't been an owner in the history of the NBA, I don't think, that has gone broke paying players. They may go broke for other reasons, but they have not gone broke from paying players. And I think players understand that. And I think the players also understand that they are the commodity that makes this business run. That fans don't necessarily engage with teams because of who the owner is, because of who the vice president is, because of who the video coordinator is. You know what I'm saying? Because of who runs ticket sales, because who's in charge of advertising, because who is the head of analytics. That's not why fans engage. That's not why, you're able to buy an arena and co-partner with the airlines and fill that arena 41 times a year with 23,000 people. It's not because of those people. It's because of those 12 dudes that collectively get on the court and play a game that entertains other individuals. You know what I'm saying? So when players recognize that, even though they do sign contracts, when players recognize that and understand that I have the ability to exercise my space and instill what I feel my value is on this marketplace, then there should be no backlash to it. Because at the end of the day, even though, once again, there's contract signed, it's still on the owners to decide how they want to flow with that. Like, let's take Kevin Durant's situation. That's a great, I think, analogy to use for this question. Kevin Durant said that he'd like to be traded. Now, the way we put it in the media is we didn't say Kevin Durant asked for a trade. We didn't say Kevin Durant said he wanted to be traded. We said Kevin Durant demands a trade. Small difference in how that message is going to be received, correctly? Now, Kevin Durant is still under his contract, I think, for 4 more years, right?
Yep, 4 years.
Now, just because somebody asks for something doesn't mean if you're in the position of you are the one that has the power over that contract. I'm being careful about not using the word owning. When you are the one that's in power of controlling that contract, you don't have to do anything. Do you? Like, no, you can do what the Bulls did with Michael Jordan. Like, no, you signed a contract. You can do whatever and say you want to, but you signed a contract, so that's what we're going to abide by. That's fine. We did the same thing with Scottie Pippen. We're like, hey, no, this is the deal you signed. Yeah, you want more money. Yeah, we know you deserve more money, but we don't have to do anything. Now, the player could be unhappy, the player does that and the other, whatever the player does, that's fine. But you are still in somewhat control of how the situation plays itself out. So, why are we mad at the athlete if ownership does something that they asked? They're the ones that's still in position to make that decision. You know, and it's funny especially when it comes to Black individuals and contracts and deals signed and holding up your end of the agreement, because in business, it happens all the time. Like, not in regular workforce thing. I'm not talking about people that, work hourly jobs. I'm talking about like people that work for businesses at the highest level where they sign contracts, where they get salaries that are based on years. People break those contracts all the time, every day. But most of those individuals, for the most part, are not Black. They don't come from the backgrounds that the NBA basketball players do. And there's not this underlying sentiment of you Negroes should be happy because we rescued you from where you came from and gave you the ability to do this thing. We gave you the ability to make us millions of dollars, so you should be happy with those millions of dollars. No, but when you come from the Harvards, the Yales, the Stanfords, the Warford, all these schools, and you're in business and you sign these contracts and you're not happy with your situation, and you're like, you know what, IBM, I'm tired of being here as executive vice president. I want out of my contract because I want to go over to Google now. We don't make a big deal out of that.
Yeah, it's only a problem.
It's not frowned upon because then it's just business.
Yeah.
But when we have the power to do that in a certain field, and one of the only fields we have in this country to do that, because of all those things I mentioned that come into play, beyond just skin color, beyond just, economic background that come up outside of positioning and all this and the other. No, that's not cool. We don't do that here. But it's the same thing that goes on. So, my thing is that it's on us to understand that narrative is always going to be painted in a way that finds us in a negative light. Because while this type of practice of wanting a change inside of a deal that you made is common practice across the board in American business, it's just not normal when it comes to us trying to enforce those changes.
Yeah, and I think, too, when we talk about the overall structure of all this, right, I think we got to acknowledge that there's a difference between being an athlete versus being an individual. And I think sometimes people have trouble identifying those two things, right? As an athlete, you may have mixed opinions about how, a player, performed in a certain game and all that. Cool, whatever, right? That is what they signed up for. Mm-hmm. But I think as an individual, we all want, the pursuit of happiness, right? We all want what's best for ourselves and our family, right? And like to your point too, we don't say this to anybody else, but the minute someone who is very talented in the game of basketball, decides to make a certain decision, all of a sudden we forget about morals. We forget about the fact that it's not a crime to want what's best for again, you and your family.
Or you may just want something different. And once again, I hate to say it, they don't have to bend to your demands. They don't have to. But here's the thing, and this is where the catch-44 is in this, is that if you're an owner and you don't want to honor somebody's request for movement, you don't have to, but you're still dealing with a labor force that is looking at every move you make, and they have the decision on their end, when their quote unquote deals are up, to not want to deal with you because of the way you dealt with other people. And I keep going back to the way Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan were dealt with the Bulls. There were years, and still to this day, that players didn't want to mess with them because they're like, if you treated Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen bad. How are you going to treat me? Now, yeah, as an organization, you're like, no, we're the ones that's in the position of power as ownership. And you're the one that, hey, you sign this deal, we're going to stick to that. Right? That's it. We don't fluctuate on that. We do not renegotiate deals in the middle of contracts. And you have the ability as the quote unquote power, the one that's position of power of that contract to stand on that. But keep in mind that there are 400 other individuals watching the way you handle that, watching how you deal with your quote unquote employees, watching how you deal with that labor force that is the one or two or three that are generating your overall millions for you. And if you treat them bad, now this is how we exercise our power. No, when my contract is up, when my deal is up, here's where I don't want to go. And they have to be very careful about that. They have to be very, very careful about that because that's the quickest way for you to lose money and lose power in whatever game you claim yourself an owner in.
And that's another reason why I believe that why all trades are given at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because they don't want that to happen.
Exactly. But that's where the leverage is. And that's what people don't, I think that's one of the things that's the hardest thing that people have to deal with when it comes to accepting how players exercise their own sense of power in this. I think it would be different if they're like, oh, as players, why don't you just live out whatever deal it is that you made and then do what you have to do once that comes up. They, for the most part, wouldn't have a problem with that. But unfortunately, you're dealing with a space where your time is limited for you to function and generate not just your family income, but income for that organization. You know, it kind of goes both ways. Like, it's like, yeah, you got 10 to 12 years inside this game to build, you know, build generational wealth for your family. But you also have that same amount of time to do what you have to do for this organization. And the organization realizes that too. So they want to milk you for as much as they can as well. Because it's not just your family's wealth, their income that they're dealing with. You know, if you're Dirk Nowitzki in Dallas, Mark Cuban's like, nah, man, I'm trying to get everything I can out of you right now while I can, because once you're gone, there's no guarantee I'm going to get a Luka to repeat this again. So I'm trying to get out of you what I can. But that's where, for the most part, is on the owner's side to make the situation great so that you get a player like Dirk who never wants to leave. That's how that power structure works. And you get players like, hey, man, you know what? You see the way Dallas treated Dirk? I'll mess with Dallas. You know what I'm saying? In a situation like a KD where he asks for a trade and then asks for teams he would like to be traded to, if you can find a way to make that happen, Dallas becomes one of those teams that he looks at and is like, hey, you know what? They treat their players nice. Miami, they treat their players right. You know what I'm saying? That's where it kind of benefits and gives some type of balance to the playing field. And before we get off the subject, let's be honest. Let's be really honest. If the owners did, over the course of the history of this, let's go back to when this whole free agency, trades, player movement started. You know, if Oscar Robertson did not have to fight in court for players to have the ability to move within the league and not be treated like cattle and slaves and all this and that, if the owners had acted right from the very beginning on how they treated their labor and how they treated players, we never would have had this. You get what I'm saying? If they had done right and been straight up fair and treated those human beings like human beings, you never would have seen the players have to push back and try to ascertain the power that they're trying to get the way they are now. It's the same thing I say with us in the media, where they talk about all these athletes now using and having their own platforms and not having to deal with us in the media. That's on us. If we had been fair with them from a media standpoint, the athletes, they never would have run out and looked for their own voice. They would have trusted us because we treated them fairly. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, and one of the final questions that I have for you is, what do you think can be done for us to improve the balance? right? What do you think can be done for there to be a true adjustment? So to your credit and to your point, there actually is somewhat of a level playing field between the players and the media, right? The players as well as general managers. That way it's not just like a back and forth battle between all parties. What do you think can be done to really make all parties in this situation satisfied?
The change in mentality of white male ownership. That's it. Yeah, that's really it. Once, and it's hard for people to think that way in a country that's built itself on the power of exercising ownership, and exactly what that word means and what owning something actually means and how you're supposed to function as an owner. And when you're dealing with the industry that is probably 90% when it comes to ownership, and that, that 90% is white, and that ownership, that 90% is male, and white males in this country historically have conditioned themselves to believe that, the functionality of an owner is this way. I own, you don't. I say, you do. That's kind of the way it flows. As long as that mentality exists, then everything's going to be the exact same. I think there are unique situations in this country when it comes to business and ownership where the labor force should be treated more like a partner. As equal is not actual shareholders, but equal in shareholding, that there's equity there, that if we work together, we are stronger. If, I kind of drop the owner labor mentality, we can function and flow better. And I think the NBA happens to be one of those, unique companies where the labor force really is the entire functionality of that business model. It really is. And until ownership across the board changes the mentality of what being an owner is in this particular space, then nothing's going to change. Nothing at all. And I unfortunately, I don't want to be a pessimist about this, but I really don't see that changing, because then the NBA would really have to be unique in contrast to every other business that functions in America. And I don't see NBA business owners across the board being that much different. You know what I'm saying? Like, every other business has that same mentality. Why should our mentality be different? I really don't see that happening. Of course, unless that particular dynamic changes. So let me flush this out a little further. If the dynamic changes from strictly being 90 to 95% white male, and it shifts to more female ownership, and it shifts to more minority ownership, and it shifts to more Black, or former player ownership. If that dynamic shifts across the next generation or two, then we'll probably see a change. But right now, in this moment, since I don't see that necessarily happening, where in the next 10 years, you see white male ownership in the NBA going from 90% to 70, 65, then it's going to take the mentality of the current, population of owners to change the way they look at what it is to be an owner in this league. And that's the only thing that's going to make that change happen.
Yeah, it's crazy because you're talking about ownership and being owning the team and stuff like that, but like, we can't even get into the front office. Like 2% of African-American males are in the front office right now in the NBA. So ownership is let's get in the front office first, and then hopefully ownership happens. But
keep in mind, they still look at us as labor. Like, they still put a ceiling on what they visualize us being able to do. Like, and the way this country functions, even as great as the NBA is, the way this country functions is that until they see us doing things outside of playing basketball on a regular basis, their mentality is not going to change. And it takes more than just one of us to be in that space in order for that change and that mentality change to fall into play. It really does. So it takes more than Michael Jordan to be the sole minority black owner in the game, because he's Michael Jordan, and you can't hold every other black individual up to that standard because there's only one of him. So, if us three wanted to get together and put an ownership team together to buy, the Sacramento Kings, they're like, we can, the only model they have to look at that looks like us that they've ever seen in this space from a majority standpoint of ownership is Michael Jordan. And three of us together ain't a Michael Jordan. There's nothing we can do to make them even look at us. You have to be like the greatest player, the most important player in this sport to be looked at as a possible owner.
It's tough.
Of his, and that's tough to do. But here's the thing. If over the course of whatever, you start to see more Grant Hills come up and become owners from a percentage standpoint, and that becomes more regular. More Magic Johnsons. You know what I'm saying? Just across the board, when that changes, when you see, if whoever succeeds Adam Silver is a black woman, who becomes commissioner in the NBA, or a black male that becomes commissioner in the NBA, or somebody of Asian descent that becomes the commissioner of the NBA. When you see that structure, when you start seeing executive vice presidents, like you said, the change that goes from 2% to 20% in the executive suites of the NBA, when you start to see that and that becomes the norm to help normalize us, then that mentality starts to shift because they start looking at us as more than just the labor force that happens to be generating the income to keep this league afloat. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's not on them choosing us. That I'm not going to give them that much power. We still have to do this. And I'm not putting that, white guilt on them for they have to feel guilty to the point that we have to hire these people because we have to make it look good because everybody's fighting for equality. No, that's actually just them taking their blinds off and looking at us as more than 3/5 of human beings. You know what I'm saying? Looking at us as having the same capabilities as other white males do when it comes to running this business, to keeping this business afloat. And once that happens and it becomes normal, where it's not just one of us in this space, one of us in this space, one of us in this space, as John Thompson used to say, he says it's a damn shame that every black coach has to be a John Thompson to be looked at in order to get a job. Like, you have to be black, you have to be this, and you have to win a championship. But because they don't apply those same principles to white guys when it comes to coaching. But when you're black and you're the only one to do it, yeah, you're the standard now. Like, everybody has to live up to that standard that looks like you now. And until that mentality changes, then nothing's going to change. But it takes more of us to happen to make that change. Dawn Staley is, trying to be the one to shape how women basketball coaches are looked at now, especially at the college level, correct? Because she is the highest paid. She is right now in the Gino Auriemma conversations now. She's looked at as being on that stage. But it's going to take more than Dawn, you know what I'm saying, to be that way. It's going to take, 3, 4, 5 to make them look at black women coaches as capable of being able to build franchises and, school programs around and be successful. It has to be more than one now in order to normalize. That's basically what I'm saying. It's nice to have one, but we're at the stage of this game where it just can't be one. Power comes in numbers, and we have to find our way into these positions for these numbers to act as normalizers when it comes to us and how they view us.
Yeah, and even to your point, too, about Mike, obviously we know his playing career, so it's like, okay, that's Mike. So he, is in there. Same case with Coach Dawn. It's like, well, we know what her playing career was like, and obviously that's a huge part of, where she's at now and everything like that. So even still, right, not everyone is going to be like those two, but just getting our foot in the door, let alone getting certain positions. But I think a lot of us is trying to get, your foot in the door and either start or continue to build up that platform where it's normalized and comfortable enough for say, okay, we see a good amount. But yeah, of course, appreciate you again, man, for pulling up on the show. This was a definitely a healthy conversation and a well-needed one. Ahmad and I, obviously, we always get into back and forth about, what's kind of happening around the league. But at the same time, it's important for all of us, to kind of reflect on where the world is in terms of the landscape and overall statistics and things like that. So it was definitely a much needed conversation.
I think it's important because for us in this country, the NBA, I don't want to say just basketball culture, but the NBA is a reflection of us in the world. You know what I'm saying? Because that's one of the few places where we publicly are able to flourish. And that becomes part of the normalization of Black individuals in this country because you get to see us perform at this level, and us performing at this level garnishes respect for not just what we do, but who we are as a people. And that's all part of the normalization. So the NBA is a reflection of our America, of us in America. So we have these basketball conversations, but to your point, it's also about our America, and how we, and this part of being us overall being normalized in America. Yeah, so it's just important for us to make sure we keep that part of the conversation at the forefront as well.
Yeah. That's definitely real. Also, I want to say thank you, Scoop, because, me and Theus, we wouldn't be here without you.
Oh, no,
you started this like 25 years ago, helping create Slam and stuff like that. So it's been an honor, my man.
And that's an honor. I tell you what, y'all would be all right. Y'all would have been all right. If I didn't, it's not seriously. Y'all were going to be all right. Look, I appreciate the love, especially coming from you all. And I love what you all are doing. And I love the responsibility you all are taking to make sure that this franchise that we started with this magazine still has legs for, 25 more years to come. I appreciate that. But, seeing what you all are able to do, understand that if I didn't exist, if I didn't happen, you all were still going to be all right. You know what I'm saying? I think it helps maybe, but you all are going to be all right. You all are going to be all right because you didn't get to where you are right now and be able to sustain it without having something inside of you to make that happen. I may have been a spark to a certain degree, but it's on you all for your ability to sustain it and keep it moving. And, I just am of the belief that if I didn't exist, you all were going to be okay. You're going to find it. And if you didn't find it, you all were going to create it. You know what I'm saying?
For sure. Well, of course, we had to give you your flowers, of course, like that. Because look, to your point, and at this entire conversation, even with athletes at the highest of levels, that doesn't happen, right? So I think it's still important for us, and in this space, to give people their flowers when it's deserved. But again, thank you again, man, for being on the show. For those of y'all listening, make sure you subscribe to No Pump Fakes wherever you get your podcasts. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, as well as Spotify. And just like that, y'all, we gone. Peace. What's up, y'all? It's Theus McBee. Make sure you go follow No Pump Fakes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.